Podcasting is a longer game and it's not as quick as a lot of other avenues to start generating subscribers. And what do you think is the most effective and long-term play to build out a good, long-lasting audience and really grow your show?
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, what's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam A. Adams, and I'm stoked because today's one of those interviews that is reversed. It's a coaching call that we're doing for free, and we're just recording it and letting it become a podcast episode for you. So I've got Terry Bailey on the podcast. One thing that's really cool is he hasn't started his podcast yet. So a lot of the questions that he's asking are really going to help you if you haven't even launched. So if you've been thinking about launching, if you've been wanting to launch, if you've been hoping to have a podcast, just didn't know where to start, Terry's probably going to ask the exact questions that are in your mind. So stick with it, stay to it. Here we jump in. Terry's bio is already in the show notes. So you want to see his bio, just scroll down. I'm not going to read it. Just scroll down. It's already there. Secondly, his websites are there. So you'll be able to find him on social, his company website. All of that's already in the show notes. And lastly, whenever he launches this podcast, he's going to give me the name of the podcast and then we're going to link to it. So that'll be in the show notes too. So if you're listening to this 3 years from now, he's probably got hundreds of episodes and you don't want to miss out. So just scroll down, grab that link and check out Terry's podcast. Terry, I'm going to do something a little bit strange with you today. Are you good for that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you two random questions that come from this pod decks I'm showing you. The listener can't see, but I've got these things called pod decks, and we have an affiliate relationship with these guys. So we'll put our affiliate links in case anybody wants to check it out and support the show. But I'm going to ask you two questions from here, and then I'll let you ask all the questions. Is that cool?
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right. Terry, would you ever sign a prenuptial agreement? These get deep.
I think my answer is no, because it comes from a place of a little distrust, and I don't want to start a marriage on that kind of foundation.
Heard. Okay. I'm going to ask you one more. If you could make one of your hobbies into a profession, which hobby would that be?
I'll be honest. What I do as a profession is I really like it. I played college sports. I played soccer. And what I realized was along the way, when you start to turn things into professions, sometimes hobbies are best left as hobbies. So like, I love playing pickleball.
I like that. I played that one time ever. And obviously I'm not very good because you can't get good at after one, but I lost horribly. But it was fun during a family reunion. And a lot of my half brothers and sisters are like, this is all they do. Like they're almost professionals. So you want to play my brothers and sisters. But I was very bad, very, very bad at pickleball. So
it's a lot of fun. But when sometimes you take the fun out of it when you go pro or when you start getting paid for it. So.
I like that answer. All right, Terry, this is your coaching call. You can ask whatever you want. And one thing that you might want to think of is I'm going to give you lots of details, as much detail as you want. And so cut me off. If you already got enough, just cut me off. That's totally fine. And I also want to say that you probably are going to have time for 1, 2, or 3 good questions. So take all of those and filter them, the ones that you really want to know first. Let's jump in.
So, right, podcasting is a longer game and it's not as quick as a lot of other avenues to start generating subscribers. And what do you think is the most effective and long-term play to build out a good, long-lasting audience? What does that look like? Obviously, it comes down to what kind of content you're doing and where you're building that out. But overall, what's the roadmap that you typically recommend folks take and say, okay, cool, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years, but once you're there, here's what it looks like. And coming down to like obviously posting consistently, really, how do you take that show and the content that's good content and really grow your show?
I like this. I'm going to give you a few answers. I'm going to give you the things that I think are going to be the most important. So I'm writing this down: avatar, quality, consistency, marketing, and I'm going to put in parentheses OPP. If you're down with OPP, you're going to be fine, Terry. All right, so let's get started. Terry's saying, obviously, podcasts are a long game. This is a game that's going to take a little bit longer. You're not going to be rich overnight, and hopefully you already understand that. You got to be able to plug away. And so he's saying, well, because this is a longer game, what are the most effective ways to kind of build that long-lasting audience so that you can keep them forever? The first one is you have to really serve your avatar. So to serve your avatar, there's a prereq, and a lot of people miss it. And it's just like you really have to understand who is your avatar. So identify the avatar, understand what they're going through. Think about psychographic, demographic, and geographic. Think about where do they live? How do they live? How many kids do they have? What are they worried about? What keeps them up at night? What is the goal that they want to achieve? What's holding them back from that goal? What's stopping them? What are the anxieties, the fears, the knowledge that they don't yet have but need? What are the motivations that are going to help trigger something so that they can jump out of where they are today to be able to serve themselves? And so, number one, I think if you want to have a long-lasting audience, you have to be able to serve your audience. You have to be able to give them the content that they are looking for, the knowledge that they are looking for, maybe even make it a little bit funny. You want to keep them engaged. You want to keep them learning and make sure that you're serving your audience. You're serving your one specific avatar. That's step one. Step two is going to be quality. So you want a long-lasting audience. You want it to be able to grow. I don't want any small thing to just get in the way of it, right? What's one small thing that could get away of it? You listen to somebody else's shitty advice that told you you don't have to spend a whole bunch of money on a microphone. Just do it from your laptop. Just do it from your cell phone. Just do it like this. Or you're going to record in a room that has a bunch of windows and it's not treated. There's no carpet. And so everything is non-porous. It's going to reverb and bounce that sound. Other things would be the internet that you use. All of these small quality things are going to make a difference in the long run. So there's people that say, don't overthink it. You can start on a zero budget. Those things are true if you want to have a podcast that only you listen to, which is actually a diary, a journal. And if that's what you're wanting is just a podcast, listen to the shitty advice that says, ready, fire, aim. Don't overthink it. You don't need a mic to have a podcast. You can have a podcast without a mic. So get the quality, the internet, the microphones, the soundproofing, whatever you need. And one resource, Terry, for you, and also for the listener, if this is what they're needing, you can go to growyourshow.com/PDF. And we just basically created a PDF of a whole bunch of equipment that we've already vetted. So instead of buying that crappy Blue Yeti, when you go to Amazon and you're like, I want a podcast mic, this shitty mic comes up that nobody ever should use for podcasting. It's the only one that shows up. And then everybody's like, oh, it's so good. And they tell their friends and like, it's just horrible. But they've done some really good marketing, which is going to be our fourth thing that you and I talk about to growing an audience is your marketing. But Blue Yeti has done a whole bunch of marketing. So they have these crappy mics. The point that I'm trying to make is we vetted some other mics that are way cheaper, but 8 times better for podcasting. So if you want to spend a third of the price and have something 8 times the quality, just go to growyourshow.com/PDF. And that's for you too, Terry. That way you can actually have some good equipment. That's going to help you for the quality. The internet, the bandwidth, a good computer. I would suggest, whenever possible, to use an Ether cord for your internet. And for those that don't understand, this is what came before Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is the wireless internet and Ether is the corded internet. And people are like, oh, it's corded. That's terrible. It ends up being a better result for you and your podcast if you're having interviews over the internet. So me, where I am, Terry, with internet, I'm up in this city called Conifer, Colorado. It's in the middle of nowhere. You can't hardly get good internet up here. And what I ended up doing is I had my personal assistant reach out to all of the places and let them know that we had to have a podcast, that a room that had good upload and download speed. And what ended up happening is they brought in, I think, 2 or 3 different phone jacks, ether cords into my office so that I could have at least 100 upload and download speed, which isn't even that great, but it is apparently, what they told me, the fastest on the hill. Nobody else has faster internet. And that was just important to us because I want to have the lowest amount of friction between my listener being able to hear the podcast, understand and enjoy the podcast, versus holding them away because maybe some weird thing like, oh, Adam's mic always cracks. Oh, it's too echoey. I can't really hear it when I'm driving, or whatever they would say. I want to minimize that. So number 2, after really serving your avatar, is just making sure you have good quality. Number 3 is consistency. There is something called Podfade. Terry, have you heard of Podfade before?
No.
What do you think it would mean? Just like, give me an idea of what you would guess Podfade is.
Burnout. I think
burnout.
That like 90% of podcasts never make it past episode 20 or 30 or something.
Bro, I will give you either $20 later. That was a perfect answer. Thank you. All right. So Podfade is 90% of people quit after the first 6 episodes. And so you got all these people that are getting excited about podcasts, but they have a couple of expectations. One of them, Terry and I already talked with you about. It's not a get rich overnight. It's a long game. This is a long process. And some people aren't ready for the long game. That's one reason for Podfade. Another reason is because you don't have a lot of listeners in the very beginning. Now, Terry comes to this episode today, recording with you, showing that he's going to be in for the long haul. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He's not going to half-ass something. He'll full-ass it, right? He's going to go all the way in. He's going to keep continuing, making sure he's putting out that content. But number 3, consistency is so critically important. So I want to give you a couple of tips how to do it a little bit better. One tip is that I want you to be able to record more episodes than you produce. And it might sound silly. You're like, well, I only really have to record the same amount that I produce. Well, just think about it in your financial life. Do you need to spend every dime that you make? Or do you want to save it? You want to bank something. Most people in the financial category, they will tell you, you need 3 months of expenses. They might also say you need 6 months of income, not just expenses. Or they might even say, I'm not even going to do this unless I have a 12 months of reserves in case I lose my job or get sick or whatever. So there's all of these different things that can happen. And you can't have life insurance for your podcast. Unfortunately, there's no death benefit. You can't just like pay someone, hey, if I go and get COVID and then go on vacation and I just can't record episodes and I fall short financially, could you just record me some episodes and publish them for my podcast? It just doesn't happen that way. So we need to get our own bank account of episodes. So I always say record more than you produce. This basically means, like for me, this week, I'm probably going to record 6 episodes, but we're only going to publish 2. So this week I'll do 6 and I'm only doing 2. And you're like, well, what are you going to do with those extra episodes? Well, last week I was in Mexico. Next week I'm on another vacation. And so it's like very helpful for me to record as much as I can whenever I can. And maybe try to get 3 months or 6 months of a savings account of episodes in the bank so that if I get sick or whatever, I'm going to be fine. So number 3, consistency. One of the biggest tips that allows somebody to have consistency is recording more than they produce. And another one is to not worry so much about the slow growth of a podcast. Number 4 is marketing. And this is getting down with OPP. And if you know me, you know I'm down with OPP. And what that is other people's podcasts. So one of the most free, organic, beneficial ways for you to grow your podcast is to be on other people's podcasts. There is a statistic, and it's real interesting. And actually, I might be making this statistic up, but I still think I'm right. I'm pretty sure. 100% of the podcast listeners from that other show that you are on listen to podcasts. So it's an easy transition for them to say, oh, Terry's got a podcast? Let me check it out. And they already have the app. They already use the app. They already know how it works. And they can quickly and easily find the link to your podcast and start listening to you. If you market on Facebook, not 100%. Again, I'm making this statistic up. I don't know the answer here, but I'm pretty dang sure that it's not 100% of Facebook users listen to podcasts. Someone's got to do the study for us, but I'm going to guess it's less than 50% or around 50% of the people that you are getting in front of on like a Facebook ad. Only maybe half of them actually listen to podcasts, but 100% of the podcast listener from the podcast episode of that other person's show that you're on to promote yourself and your business and support other people, all of them listen to podcasts. Very easy for them to transition into your show. So get down with OPP, get on other people's shows, other people's podcasts, add value. And one of the best ways of getting down with OPP is to actually have your own show. It's kind of funny because it's kind of like they both add to each other. So you have a podcast and now you're an influencer, we'll call you. You're a podcaster, you're an influencer, you've got a show. And even if nobody listens yet, you still have some type of credibility from these other podcast hosts that say, ooh, Terry Bailey, I've heard of his show. I found him at this one place. I'm going to reach out to him and see if we could maybe do an interview swap. Or maybe they won't say interview swap. Maybe they'll just invite you on their show and cross their fingers that you would reciprocate and have a reciprocal interview where you're going to jump on their show. You're going to bring them on your show too. So it's like incest. That's what it is. It's total incest. And like you go into the real estate category of podcasts and you hear the same. Back in the day, it was 4 people. Like when I started my real estate podcast, there was 4 of us. And now it's like the same 300 people. But they're on all of the podcasts and they're being interviewed back and forth on each other's shows. And it's helpful because the listener, the avatar who listens to that one podcast definitely knows all those shows. And because of that exposure, they might start listening to that other podcast regularly and religiously. So number 1, serve your avatar. Number 2, make sure you have good quality. Number 3, consistency. Number 4, marketing. There's going to be organic and paid. The organic is getting down with OPP. The organic is your own Facebook posts. You're on social, you're on your LinkedIn, and you're posting about the episodes that you're doing. Maybe you have an email list. Maybe it's only 100 people, 30 people, 7,000 people, or 2 million people on your email list. That's a great place to be able to let people know that you've got podcast episodes coming out regularly. So you're going to want to market the free way, the way that you don't have to pay anything, and you want to be able to market the paid way. So here's just a couple of examples of paid stuff. And I want you to think of this as your road trip from, let's say, Miami, Florida, to, let's call it the wine country, Sonoma Coast in California. Okay. And so that's where you know where you're coming from. You know where you're going. You have a plan. You've already road mapped from here to there. You know, if you're going to go on the 40 or the 70 or the 10 or the 80 or whatever, you already have road mapped that out. When are you going to go up? Is it going to be on the 15, the 25, or the 5, or what? Some other freeway? When are you going to come up? All of these things are important. And these are the things that most podcasters understand. I need a roadmap. I need to know where I'm going. I need to know what I want to achieve. And then what they forget is adding fuel to the tank. And so they don't go anywhere. So they're in Miami and they're just twiddling their thumbs, wondering why they're not at Sonoma Coast drinking the best Pinot Noir in this planet. Why are they not there yet? And the problem is they haven't put fuel in the tank, so they can't get anywhere. The fuel in the tank is the analogy to paid ads, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, LinkedIn ads, wherever you can promote yourself, other people's email list. You can pay them to do 6 shout outs of your podcast. Why 6? Because psychology shows us that it takes 6 to 13 times for somebody to see the same message before they actually believe in the product or the person. And so you're going to pay that person that, hey, I want you to throw out 6 shout outs about my new podcast in this space. And when you do that, you're going to be getting in front of your perfect avatar. My company, we do a lot of paid ads for our clients as well. So we run all of the ads. We do Facebook ads. We do something called a private message campaign. Private message campaign is a really cool thing you could do on your own as the free way of organic marketing if you want. It's going to take a lot of time, but you can do it without paying a dime. Or you can have private message campaigns with maybe your own virtual assistant that is working with you. And maybe you're paying them $3, $6, and $10 an hour to run all of this stuff on your behalf. And the third option is working with my team, Grow Your Show, where we'll run those ads where we hire and train a person, our own virtual assistant, to jump into 3 different platforms. We're going to call these meetup.com. Some of you haven't heard of that before, so look it up, meetup.com. We'll make sure the link's in the show notes. Facebook.com. And finally, LinkedIn.com. What I like about Meetup, Facebook, and LinkedIn for private message campaigns is 2 things. The first one is that they all have a private message. On Meetup, you can go in and DM anyone that's in these groups. The second reason that I absolutely love these 3 platforms is because you can filter and find the exact avatar that you're looking for. So if I want somebody who is an attorney, let's say just criminal defense attorney, who wants to go from criminal defense attorney, making decent money, to becoming civil law, where now they're making like $1 million every time they settle a case, right? And so they want to go from making medium amounts of money, $200, $300 an hour, to insane amounts of money. We're going to call it $600,000 every 2 months when you settle a new case. So this attorney, that's their goal. They want to go from this to that so they can make the big bucks, but they don't know how to do it. All right. So you're going to start a podcast for attorneys to be able to get them from criminal defense to civil so that they can start making the real money that's going to impress their friends. Right. So you start a podcast that serves that person. And then my team comes and serves you. We come and do DM campaigns, private message campaigns on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Meetup. Here's the cool thing. On meetup.com, we can search attorneys in Denver, attorneys in LA, and we can find groups of attorneys. We can even say criminal defense bar, criminal defense attorney. We can find all of these groups of Meetup that the only members are the perfect avatar. We can also find that person by going to LinkedIn. So we filter it a different way. On LinkedIn, what we'll do is we'll search for, I want people in this city who have this job title, basically that says criminal defense attorney, who have this job title, who do this and in this way. We filter all of that out, push a button, and all you get is the exact avatar. So if my team's working for you, we've already got that person, we're DMing them for you, starting a conversation with them, and eventually telling them about your podcast to be able to serve a criminal defense attorney to start doing civil law. Last piece of that was Facebook. And so we can go to like Facebook groups of criminal defense attorneys, criminal defense bars, and we can find the people that are in there, the attorneys that are active, and then we can start DMing them as well. So we do it on Meetup, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Hopefully that's helpful. These 4 things, if you're serving your avatar perfectly, if you have good quality, good consistency, and you're marketing and advertising on a regular basis, adding fuel to your tank so you don't get stuck in Miami, but you can actually have that delicious Pinot Noir from wine country, then you're going to be able to have a long-lasting audience if you do these things. What other questions or clarifications do you need right now, Terry?
Let me just say, wow, that was a very, very granular, very, very specific, awesome answer. So yeah, I guess with the clients that you have worked with, what is a general expectation, right? So say I want to build out my show to 10,000 active listeners. So that's the roadmap, right? So if I'm talking about the same analogy, right? I'm driving a car from Florida to California. I have an idea of how long that's going to take and how much gas that's going to take. Do you have an idea of what that typically looks like for your typical client?
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple parts. The first one is it generally takes longer and costs more than you think. And so I would just want to say it's going to happen with your podcast, just like it would happen. I've known a lot of people that start an entrepreneurship journey. And again, they're thinking like, I could just run this company. We'll call it a drop shipping company. I could just run this company. And I've known other people that are making, let's say, $20,000 a month. And so I just need to get that up and running and I'll be fine. And then they'll estimate that it's going to take them a month. And then what ends up happening is like a few months later, I actually know one person who just hired their coach for a similar business. A few months later, it's like still hard. It's still a lot. There's still moving part and there's a lot. And so it's like, okay, now I'm going to get that coach. I'm finally going to just invest in myself and have that coach alongside with me to be able to support me and shorten that gap of time. So what we're talking about is I've known a lot of fix and flippers that go in and they start to want to be a fix and flipper because they watched HGTV. It ruined their whole life. And then all of a sudden they try it. It's harder than they thought. It's longer than they thought. They can't find the deals. And when they do find the deal and finally close on it, the interest rate goes up on them. Or if that interest rate doesn't go up, the contractor that they hire is doing change orders. The contractor said, oh, this is going to be $35,000. And then they find something's behind the walls, something's in the basement. There's a water intrusion. There's mold because of the water intrusion. And $35K turns into $95K. And now they've lost $30,000 on this flip because it costs longer and takes longer than they expect. So I want you to go in with your eyes wide open, Terry, and the listener as well, and to give some of those gaps, just like my friend who had a similar company to a drop shipping company that worked on it for a little while and now is like, okay, I just need that person. This is something that my team can help you with. We can streamline the gap. If you're doing a podcast, you want it to be successful. To answer your question, Terry, how long does that take with our clients? Most of the time, we're going to have a podcaster that starts a brand new show, and we can usually get them ranking into the top 10% or top 1% of all podcasts worldwide within the first year of launch. The reason that this happens is because our beginning 8 weeks of working with, actually not working with them, because it's going to take usually about 2 months from the time you pay us to the time that your first episode is live. It's usually going to take like 8 weeks. Now, if you're on one of our cheaper packages, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. Most expensive package with a lot that needs to be done, maybe 12 weeks. Let's just say average 8 weeks from, hey, I just paid you, to, hey, I actually have a podcast that's launched and people are listening to it. 8 weeks. Second part of the question. Now, the first 8 weeks of launch, not to be confused with the 8-ish weeks it's going to take to launch, but the first 8 weeks of launch, my team does a shit ton of marketing. We add a lot of fuel to your fire. We want to try to put jet fuel in that thing so that you can really get started with traction. You want to be able to gain that traction immediately. So we put a whole bunch of marketing in the first 8 weeks. We do that because we need to trigger some algorithms that are in the podcast playing platforms. These algorithms basically are split testing you against some other person that's starting a podcast. I'm sorry, Terry, Apple probably loves you. I'm sure they do, but they don't think like this. Holy shit, Terry Bailey, he just launched a podcast. Well, we got to put this in front of 1 million people. That way he can get all the traction he wants. What they're doing instead is they're split testing. They're saying, well, okay, here's 9 out of 10 people that start a podcast don't even get past 6. So here's Terry Bailey launching a podcast. I'm not sure if he's going to make it past 6. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here, twiddle my thumbs, and watch him fail like 90% of the people who Podfade, because they're not listening to all that other stuff, consistency that we already talked about. So they split test you, but if some other person's podcast is getting traction in their first 8 weeks, then Apple's going to go and listen to the podcast. They're going to have their actual staff listen to the podcast, or they could use AI. By the time some people listen to this, it's all AI. Well, what they can be doing is they'll see that you're triggering some algorithm that's saying he's getting traction even without us. So they're split testing you and they're saying this person's getting some traction, this other person's not. Let's see what happens if we listen to this podcast to see if it's any good. They listen to it and it is good. Terry has something valuable to say. So that's great. And the next thing they're going to do is see how is push you in front of a few more people. And once they do that, if you start to gain more traction and those listeners stay with you, Now you've been able to achieve some status where you're going to be able to eventually get to that 10,000 listeners, which Terry, you said 10,000. 10,000 is a shit ton of listeners. Just FYI, top 10% of podcasts, write this down, have about 300 downloads per episode. Top 10%. Top 1% of podcasts have 3,500 downloads per episode. So if you've got 3,500, you're already better than 99 other podcasts in your genre. 3,500. Now, there are millions of listeners, but there are also millions of podcasts. A couple of years ago, there was 800,000 podcasts, and people thought that was a lot. And then COVID happened, and everybody's bored. They're working from home. Their boss isn't looking at them. And so they decide, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to try to get into my own thing. And in 2020, we went from 800,000 podcasts to 1.5 million. And as we record today, we're almost approaching 3 million. We're in the high 2 million different podcasts. So you just want to be able to figure out, how do you become into the top 10% or top 1%? So that you can at least trigger an algorithm so that Apple and these other platforms, Stitcher and iHeart and Spotify and Google and any of these other platforms, Amazon, Alexa, you want to make sure that they will see something happening and push you in front of more of their listeners. And that can happen by you being able to get some more traction in the first 8 weeks. So when working with us, we especially put that rocket fuel in those first 8 weeks of launch. And then most of our clients are ranking between 6 and 12 months. They'll be able to achieve that 300 downloads per episode or 3,500 downloads per episode, whichever level that they decide that they want, that they're looking for, or that they can afford. So there's that. And I will say, on the scary part, big sales pitch here, on the scary part, if you work without us, it will take a lot longer. It will be way harder. You probably only have you and your mom listening. So it becomes a diary, a journal. And so it's like, you've put out all this work. You've went ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire. You've listened to these people that says done is better than perfect, instead of let's actually have a plan and make sure that these first 8 weeks have some fuel to the fire. And it's going to make you so you're swimming upstream. And most likely, here's the average of people that don't work with Grow Your Show. The real actual average of the people, the top 10% that stay podcasting, that don't work with us, they will usually have 5,000 to 10,000 downloads total, not per episode. I mean, after a year or two, they will have 5,000 to 10,000 after 1 or 2 years of their podcast. It's basically them and their mom that are downloading all the episodes all the time. And their mom really loves them. That's great. They love themselves. That's great. But nobody else is listening. So it takes a year or two to get 5,000 or 10,000 downloads. Most of our clients are probably going to be 5,000 or 10,000 downloads before 6 months, before 6 months ever happens. And it's because we're adding fuel to the fire. Does that answer your question, or do you have any other clarification?
No, yeah, great answer. Great answer. So I'm curious, your avatar, right? Talking about your clients and what they've done. Who's someone that you feel like, God damn, these guys did a really good job. They listened to us. They executed very well. Who's your star child?
Well, I've got a couple really great clients. And for the most part, the stuff that I will ask them to do is serve their avatar, have good quality, and have good consistency. I just say, do these 3 things and then let us handle all the back end. I don't want you to edit your own podcast. I don't want you to write your own show notes. I don't want you to have to figure out the title. I don't want you to even have to email your guest. If you've got to email your guest, if you got to download this and go and email your guest, you're not in your lane. You're in someone else's lane. You're in my lane. I want to be in that lane for you so that we can email your guest for you. We'll create all the promotional images. We'll post it on your social. We'll put it on your website so that you just be the star of your show. You push record, you're done. That's all you got to do. And so for the clients that you're talking about that are successful, they listen to that. They get away from the fear, honestly, of the expense Like going back to my friend who has a company similar to a drop shipping company that tried it on their own for a short amount of time. It wasn't working as fast or as well as they wanted. So they finally decided, I'm going to work with somebody that knows what they're doing, that can just like streamline this. I want you to just be the star, and then let us edit and publish and promote and put it on Facebook and put it on your website, put it on Amazon Alexa, make sure everybody can find you. We'll promote it. We'll add fuel to the fire. And you just do one thing, record, just record, be the star of your show. And that's when you're going to be the most successful. So a couple of people that have gotten a lot of success, I'm going to bring up Corey Peterson. Corey Peterson is one of my best friends, one of my favorite people. Wasn't always a friend, but I always liked him. I met him at a real estate event years ago. At the time, I think I had 300 apartment units. And Corey at the time, I think had about 600 apartment units. And then at my pinnacle, I got up to 1,400. And he's like 3,000 or more, and he just keeps growing. I'm at this event and he's just a badass. He's somebody who implements things, and he's somebody who stays in his own lane automatically. And so for a long time, he didn't know how to do that with his podcast, because he and I started our podcast before a lot of the companies that can serve a podcaster and do the editing and post-production and all this stuff weren't around. So Corey starts his podcast years and years ago. It's called Multifamily Legacy Podcast. Basically, he told me I'm allowed to share this stuff. He wasn't having very many downloads. He wasn't having like hardly any downloads. So he's one of those people who had his podcast for like 3 or 4 years. At the time that my company decided to serve him, we decided to work together. He had his podcast for like 3 or 4 years. He was, I think, in total at like 12,000 downloads total. I mean, not per episode. We're talking like dozens per episode, not thousands per episode. And so he's like pushing out some really good content. He's got a coaching program that crushes it, that helps a lot of people. He hosts this legacy boardroom, but his podcast isn't getting the traction that he wanted at all. So he comes in after several years of trying it on his own, and we just start adding some fuel to the fire. We also just do all the back end. We're emailing his guest, all of these promotional images, and we're telling them to share it. So Corey doesn't even think about that anymore. And he goes from having very small, we'll call it 1,000 downloads per month, to he got up to 30,000 downloads per month. Not per episode. I think he's publishing 4 episodes a month, 4.333 episodes a month, technically, because there's 52 weeks. Anyway, so Corey goes from 1,200, 1,000 downloads in a month to 30,000 downloads in a month. And he becomes one of our top, not affiliates, because I don't pay him a dime, but he becomes one of our top referral sources. And so now my company's getting like all of these other clients because Corey is well known in the space. And now everybody's hearing his podcast. He does a really good job with his podcast. And instead of just him and his mom listening, now a whole bunch of other people are also listening. So he's a star. I'll say another couple of stars would be, I'm going to name drop 2 people, but I want you to know ahead of time that they did a lot on their own as well. They listened to everything that I said. They listened to other things that other people said, but they implemented the things that my company teaches other people. And that's the point, is the things that we're going to do for you, Terry, and maybe the listener, are the things that these other 2 people did. Stephen Pesavento, he's got a podcast called Investor Mindset. And another one is Whitney Sewell. He's got a podcast called Syndication Show. So these guys were friends. Stephen was in my mastermind group. So I was running a mastermind group. And in that mastermind, I outlined everything that we talked about, what Whitney did, what I did, what some of my other friends did that had worked for them. And so in my mastermind that we ran, everybody gets a chance to present something. And for me, way back then, I had already kind of figured out this system, the algorithms that we need to hack into to have a great podcast. So Stephen is there. He listens to everything that we say. He takes amazing notes, and he's just like Corey. He's an implementer. He'll jump in immediately. So Stephen, he launches his podcast. I help promote it. I do a little bit of promotion to my email list. He listens to a few things that I say and some other people say, and he ends up becoming top 1%. And he gets ranking. At the same time, another podcast is launching in the business category called BiggerPockets Business. Stephen Pesavento and BiggerPockets launched the same week. That's actually a true story, random. But Stephen had done the things that he learned from other people and from my mastermind group, and I promoted it. And because of this little bit of traction, BiggerPockets had a different podcast that already had millions of listeners and downloads. And BiggerPockets also has a forum where millions of investors come. And obviously, they're promoting themselves across everything that they can think of. But they don't know the tricks that we know that Stephen used. And what ends up happening is Stephen is top 10 in 4 categories. BiggerPockets is top 10 in 1 category at the same time. BiggerPockets was actually number 4 in the business category, while Stephen was number 1 in the business category. Because Stephen launched with purpose, instead of ready, fire, aim, it was ready, aim, fire. Stephen took a page out of Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because he didn't want to be an ineffective person. So he began with the end in mind. He followed that advice instead of, just start. Don't overthink it. It doesn't matter. You don't even have to have a mic. Stephen started with all of the things, with purpose, and by teaming up with people like me, who is the leader of his mastermind that he was in, and asking me a favor. Can you push this out to your people? So Stephen's doing all the promotion he can. He's just like I told that whole group, Stephen's individually calling people. Terry, he's calling people and saying, hey, Charles, I just launched my podcast, man, and I need your help. I need a couple people that I trust to just listen to an episode or 2 of the podcast and then leave an honest review. And Stephen did this with, I don't know, like 200 people. He's a go-getter. I think I told my mastermind to do it with 100 people. And then Stephen doubles it, probably calls like 200 people individually. He's private messaging them. He's DMing them. He's calling them. He's sending out emails to his email list. He's partnering up with his other friends that are real estate influencers and asking, can you promote this? Can you share it to your audience? And then he becomes top 1%, literally in 4 categories, top 10. One of those categories was the new and noteworthy. One was investing. One was business, where he was number 1 against BiggerPockets Business with millions of people, who was number 4. And some other category, I think it was personal development. Stephen was also in top 10. So this is the process. This is the way that if you listen to the stuff you learn on this podcast, or if you team up with Grow Your Show, this is the types of results that you'll get if you're following through with these things. Steve, what's his name? Whitney Sewell, he launched a daily podcast. That's one of the reasons why it's so successful, is because let's go back to OPP. Let's talk about OPP for a quick sec, and then I got to jump off. Whitney has the ability to have conversations with 7 people a week. He's actually probably doing 12 every Friday, or he used to do Saturday, 12 every Saturday, so that he could publish 7 a week, so that he could have a bank account. Well, Whitney did a lot of these things. One of them is having more conversations. Now, all of these people that are interviewed, Terry, I'm just going to tell you, this might happen. You might find yourself listening to my podcast because I'm adding some value to you. You're being on my show. And then tomorrow you might be curious about, oh, what does Adam have to say about this? Let me search. Let me see what else he's got. Or maybe at a minimum, when your podcast episode comes out, yours comes out, this one that we're listening to now is going to come out, and you might listen to this one. And at the same time, you might download a few others, and you might just get curious and check out another one. Well, that's what happens with Whitney Sewell. not a client or anything, Whitney, just a friend. He asked a lot of people for advice before he launched. I gave him as much as I could. He followed mine and other people's, and it worked for him. One of the things is he's having all these conversations with all these people, and they might listen. They might share it with their friends. They might get excited they were on a podcast or whatever it is. And so his podcast can organically grow much faster, 7 times faster than somebody who's only doing 1 episode a week. So that's another benefit. And then he's getting down with OPP. Other people are on his show. He's on their show. It can be a huge way to get in front of the most amount of people. Terry, we should jump off. I think our listeners got a ton of value already. I just want to speak to the listener for a second. Check out the next episode because I go every other episode. Some of them are interviews, and then the others are solo. Just want to pour into you on the very next episode. There's some good content that I've already developed, already created, and I know it's exactly for you because you're my avatar. So don't go anywhere. I'll see you on the next episode. Check out Terry Bailey in the show notes. We'll see you next time.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.